Hey folks, Ms. Schaaf has been the finance lady, so we'll let her run the study session as we have been doing with the other ones, right?
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, Mayor Joe, Chief Dan, and all our honored guests and colleagues today. We are gathered today for a study session agenda of the ARP proposal for the Erie Police Department, and we will begin with Chief Dan speaking to us. Is that right?
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I'm going to present our plan and then ask some of the invited guests here to speak tonight. Michael? Yeah. After the past 4 years as chief, I've spoken to many of you regarding various complaints you've received from citizens. Drunks in parks or on the bayfront, panhandlers, homeless, speeding, curfew violations, overdoses, drug houses, and shootings. Well, today I wish to present the problems and the possible solutions. Let me mention to you our first year in the body-worn camera is done. It's been a very successful year. Over 100,000 videos recorded, over 30 terabytes of memory, and most importantly, complaints about officers have dropped dramatically. I have a short highlight reel of some of the incidents over the past year. It's funny, scary, dangerous, and life-saving, but I'm going to save them for later. The American Rescue Plan was designed to address the impact of COVID-19. President Biden has said ARP funds can be used for hiring police, tackling gun violence, fighting crime waves, and improving services provided to communities. Making our communities safe and encouraging people and businesses to stay, invest, and grow here requires us to provide safety and security. We've been doing the best we can for the past 15 years at the same level of policing as we've had. Back in 2005, the city was on the verge of Act 47 and was forced to cut over 40 officers, detectives, staff, crisis car, juvenile unit, canine unit. All were eliminated. However, in the past 2 years, policing has changed. We started a police athletic league, a COPS program, community relations outreach programs, many new initiatives, but with no help, with no new cops. In 2020, COVID-19 hit us. Not only was policing turned upside down, so was everyone's lives. Things changed. Mental health problems, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, overdoses, shootings, assaults, domestic violence, and juvenile crimes all rose. Suddenly, walking around downtown and along the bayfront did not feel safe. We had shootings by the dock and the waterfront just this past year. An example, we have a video here tonight of an officer. This was just a few weeks ago. It's around noon. He's downtown and it's on his way to pick up some evidence. He's driving up French Street. When he gets to 11th, he sees a male with a machete. This male is attacking another male. The victim is not seen on this video, but he required transportation to the emergency hospital. This body-worn camera is the second officer who arrives after the first officer calls for help. The first officer, as I told you, was going to pick up evidence and wasn't on a call. He didn't take the body camera with him because he usually works here in the office. We have the video queued up. You can see it there.
Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Drop the knife, bro. You don't want to do this. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Drop the knife, dude. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. Drop the knife. taser deployed on effective.
Drop the knife! Hands! Put your hands behind your back! Now! Give me cuffs! Pull everybody down. Slow everybody down. Calm down.
This is just one of many violent incidents officers face on an almost daily basis. Luckily, the first taser that did not work, another officer with the taser was able to take that suspect down. Otherwise, it could have had a much different ending. He was within 8 feet of the initial officer when he started charging at him. That officer would have been justified to use deadly force. His restraint was amazing. And fortunately, it had a good ending. In 2020, the ATF prepared a violent crime assessment report for the Erie Police Department. Its findings include both shooting incidents and shooting victim rates were increasing. The Erie Police Department's own statistics showed that stolen firearms yearly were rising. Recovered firearms were also rising, which showed that Erie police were working hard taking guns off the street, but many of them still exist out there. Even worse, homicides in Erie continue to increase over the past 20 years. In 5-year periods on the chart, you'll see from 2001 to 2005, there were 20 homicides. Around 2005 was the elimination of the juvenile unit. Homicides jumped from 20 to 32. The following 5 years, 2011 to 2015, there were 44 homicides. 2 of the victims now were 16 years old, and 2 suspects were 14 years old. In 2016 to 2021, there were 48 homicides. 1 victim, 14 years old, 2 suspects, 14 years old. It's a disturbing trend over the 20 years. In 2021, we've had 2 people killed that were directly related to last year's homicide of the 14-year-old. And again, last night, we had our 6th homicide of the year. Now, we've been working Operation Four Nations since 2018, with a series of major crimes, including 3 homicides, multiple robberies, home invasions, and burglaries occurred. We recently made arrests of gang members who at the time of the crimes were 16 and 17 years old. Our juvenile contacts in 1 year rose more than 500 documented contacts. Yet the arrests of juveniles are at an almost all-time low. Less attention by detectives because of too many major crimes has led us not to be able to deal with those issues with the juveniles that we used to. Further demands on the police. In the past 5 years, you can see on the chart that police have responded to more and more calls for help by other agencies. Assist Other Agency calls, or AOAs, just 4 years ago was around 2,300. By the end of this year, we'll be over 3,000 calls for assistance. Crisis services and mental health calls for service continue to rise. Overdoses. You see on the chart that overdoses, we had 137 1 year, jumped to 286 the next. In that same time frame, officers used Narcan 106 times, jumped to 212. That's just 1 year's stats. The impact of COVID-19 is more than just numbers. It's a change inside of people. We have a video here. I'm sure you recall this incident. This is the same neighborhood. We've had multiple shootings, stabbings, and fights. Even refuse workers were pelted with bricks and stones. One night they became cover for gunmen who walked up behind them until they got close to a house and they shot up a house party. Somebody from the house returned fire, striking the garbage truck. Refuse workers cannot even safely do their job. Currently, our police department is made up of 175 officers. There's 5 in the command staff, 10 staff officers, 30 detectives, and 130 uniformed officers. That's not a lot when you consider we cover 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Then the detectives, they're following up on the crimes that are reported. Whether it's the major crimes detectives, and they have a lot of different areas that they cover. The burglary detectives, white collar, and the drug squad. Currently, the detectives get over 3,000 major crime reports a year and almost 5,000 minor crimes. That's 8,000 crimes divided by 30 detectives. That's 266 cases a year. It's simply impossible to work that many cases. In 2020, there was 1,425 unassigned cases. In 2021, we're already at 1,615, and we still have a full month to go. Only the most serious cases are assigned. We have to prioritize. What's the seriousness? What's the probability of solving? And are there known suspects? In 2019, PFM Consulting did a study of Erie's finances. The study included police staffing of Erie, Allentown, Reading, Scranton, and Bethlehem. The Erie Police Department had the least staffing per capita of any of those cities. Currently, our department of 175 is staffed like this. 166 are currently in the budget being paid by tax money here in the city. The Housing Authority pays for 6. We have grants that pay for insurance fraud detective, an auto theft detective, and the PAL supervisor, which the position ends this coming year. 175 total officers. But that's not all we do, because the Erie Police Department supports many task forces and programs, such as the District Attorney Drug Task Force, the Attorney General, the FBI, the DEA, Drug Task Forces, the Gun Working Group, U.S. Marshals, PA Aggressive Driving, the DA's DUI Task Force. We do tobacco compliance and alcohol programs, and we have almost 80 officers that work the Police Athletic League. Over 200 task force positions. There's about 140 officers in the department that do these jobs. So some of them are working 2, 3, and 4 side jobs here in order to fill all of these positions. These task force programs are important, and it is outside money coming in that pays for them. As of October 31st of this year, over $360,000 was brought in overtime money. $509,000 paid for salary and benefits directly, and another $509,000 was used for equipment. That's over $1.3 million we've sought out. And over the past 4 years, we've brought in over $5 million to supplement our operations and keeping the city safe. On the police contract side, I can speak for my 31 years here that the latest contract is the lowest raises the officers have received in 30 years. I'm told that the savings over the 8-year contract is over $6 million. Many other PFM financial recommendations have been completed. We're doing all we can. We literally look under every rock, and we think that ARP money here might be the answer. So I'm here to ask you to use some ARP money to help fix some of these issues. There's 3 basic breakdowns here that I'm looking at. The first is to request 9 new officers so that we can restart the crisis car. Family crisis car was in existence in the 70s and 80s in Erie. It was very successful, and there's several individuals here from social service agencies that worked directly with those officers and can speak to the success of those programs. It takes 9 officers in order to provide 2 officers for 3 shifts every day of the week, all year. By reinstating the unit of specially trained officers to work directly with our social service and mental health partners, they'll respond to calls of mental health crises and transport to hospitals for evaluation. They'll work with the homeless population and deal with the issues in the downtown area. They also work on domestic dispute calls, partnering with SafeNet and conducting follow-ups on the lethality assessment program. The specialized training here is the key, but that is the first ask. The second is requesting additional staffing, new detectives to restart the juvenile unit. Again, the juvenile unit was one of those that was cut years ago. Specially trained detectives working directly with the juvenile justice system, with school police and juvenile probation, diverting the minor crimes into diversion programs, preventing those kids from becoming the gang members and the shooters that we're facing today. Detectives will assist with major crimes and criminal cases that go unassigned. No juvenile detectives for the past 15 years has created a generation of juvenile offenders whose minor infractions did not get addressed and now is causing an upward trend in shooting and gang activity.
How many you got?
That was 6. Yeah, that would be the second bucket, as it's called there, juvenile unit. That would be 6. The first one, crisis car, would take 9. The last part of the ask would be another 6 additional officers for capacity. 4 of these officers would be assigned to the neighborhood action team. These are the officers that work the high crime hours. They concentrate on the gun and gang violence, along with addressing complaints of drug activity. They attend the neighborhood watch meetings and work with neighbors to develop solutions to their concerns. An additional 2 officers would allow our recruitment and community outreach officers to continue working on building and expanding their programs. We would backfill those 2 officers into the patrol division so that the paladin cop supervisor can solely concentrate on their operations. In 2009, President Obama signed the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. It allocated $1 billion of funding to local police officers through the Community-Oriented Police Services, COPS program. After the first year of funding, violent crime in Erie dropped by 27%. Those police department staffing levels that were 3.2% higher had crime levels that were 3.5% lower. A report in the Review of Economics and Statistics calculated that of every dollar spent on extra policing, it generates about $1.63 in social benefits. And I know I've given you a lot of information here to digest, and I have a few invited guests here that I'd like to give them a chance to speak, as well as the finance, because I'm sure you'll have questions. But before we do, I'd like to end my portion here with a short video recap of our body worn can program. And I'll narrate a couple of the scenes. Funny, serious, dangerous, life-saving. Here we go.
Oh, I am sorry about that.
That would be the first time I've done it myself.
And that was on body cam too, so supervisor gonna love that one.
Come on, Izzy, get in the house. You.
This guy just runs out of the store at 6 in the morning.
You have a gun on you or anything? In this pocket? Okay.
You have a gun on you? Yes, it's in my pocket.
Just kill me, bro. Kill me, bro. Just chill out. Stop it. Chill out. Chill out. Just kill me, relax. Stop.
These are still shots of a picture of an apartment the officers were recently in. Be glad I can't give you the smell. There's a gun on the seat. We're taking the driver's still in there. Watch out for low tree branches.
I'm Scott.
But she saw the motorcycle she
I
wanted.
have a badge for you.
Like a real police officer!
You lost your fire. You won't let go of that bag. That's what's in the bag. Gun. Another gun. Officer tased him as he's running away from him. Nobody would hurt themselves, would they?
Stop right there. Stop. Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
Another gun.
Look, you punched me in the face. I didn't punch you in the face. No, I swear to God. I didn't punch you in the face. You punched? Yeah, exactly. I have a body camera. No, just.
As he tells the other officers he was punched in the face, and then the officer realized, hold it, I have my body cam on. I never punched you. Those are just some of the situations that officers face on a daily basis, and something to think about. You know, what you saw, some of those at night when they're out there chasing people, you can see how close lives are here when they're chasing people with a gun. We've been very fortunate. That happens more frequently than you'll ever know, because that's the job we do. We keep the city safe.
Night and day.
Night and day.
Middle of the night and day.
And Shaf, I have Paul's here to talk about the financial parts of this, if you'd like to get into that. Or I have some speakers here from different agencies that may wish to add a little bit of input to this. Whichever you'd like to hear first.
Thank you, Chief. I would like to hear the input of the people first. Whoever you'd like to go on.
Sure, we'll let them go up and speak, if you don't mind.
Hi, my name is Lana Reese. I'm the Office of Children and Youth Director, and I'm here representing the Department of Human Services. We did submit some information to you for your consideration in writing, so I just wanted to make a brief statement in our support. The Department of Human Services includes OCY, Office of Children and Youth, which also includes the Edmund L. Thomas Detention and Shelter, the Mental Health and Intellectual Disabilities Division, as well as the Office of Drug and Alcohol Programs. We echo that this world is becoming more dangerous and that we need to work together to find solutions. This expansion will allow the specially trained officers to help keep individuals and the community safe. Erie was a leader in innovative policing through the crisis car and the other units. While funding was not able to be maintained, we do have the framework available to us in order to build upon and become once again innovative leaders in community policing. Whether it's behavioral health, drug and alcohol, juvenile justice, or any of the other areas that we are involved in, we are committed to working with the police to follow up after those individuals are identified through their interactions with the police to ensure that they receive the services that are available to them in this community. So once again, we thank the Erie Police Department for their partnership across all the Department of Human Services. We can't do our job without you, and we really appreciate everything that you do for us. We also have Mandy Fauble here, who is the Director of Safe Harbor, who also has our Crisis Services unit, who works very closely with the previous crisis car, who would like to offer some input as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I am Dr. Mandy Fauble. I am the Director of Clinical Care Services at UPMC Western Behavioral Health at Safe Harbor. It is true that I started my career early on when the crisis unit still existed, and what I remember is how closely we worked with law enforcement. We still do every day, and that's actually where I would like to start with is just a huge thank you to the police officers that are here. And I say that as a person who has called 911 when I've been so scared I couldn't even do it because someone was coming through my door at me. And my building at 26th Street, it's EPD that comes. And when you're sending a crisis staff person out into the community, I can't tell you what that's like to worry about the safety of your team. We don't go out with guns. We go out with expertise in de-escalating situations, but we sometimes need people to keep us safe. We rely very heavily on this team to do that. We are working together closely every day. Here's what a response car would do. It actually helps us to beef up the quality. It makes us more efficient when we have a specialized vehicle, and it helps our law enforcement focus. What I have heard over the years, over and over and over again, is how difficult it can be for a law enforcement officer to be out with us on a mental health call and their radio is going off. And it's something where someone's in trouble and someone needs them. And we're back to that, like, how do you prioritize all of that? How do you do that response? And a dedicated response gives people the resources that they need to make that happen so that we don't have to make the hard choices. We serve more people and we serve them together. And I want to add on that togetherness piece that we know that people with mental illness and people with drug and alcohol concerns don't do well in jail. It does not work. There's tons of data on that. It's very, very expensive. What I also want to share with you is it's incredibly demoralizing to these people who go and see terrible things every day, right? They see terrible things every day. And if we don't give people the tools that work, then we ask them to just go and do it again tomorrow, and go and do it again the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that, without providing adequate resources. You can tell I feel very strongly about this because I see what they deal with. And as a behavioral health professional, I don't care just about people with mental illness. I care about the people helping them. And we have to give people better tools to do this. I'm going to end with an anecdote. And it is one of the highlights of my career, actually. So I teach a class called Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. It is a training that we often have law enforcement participate in with us. And I was privileged once to sit in a room with a person who had a mental illness, who had actually tried suicide by cop. Have you all heard of this? Person shows up, they're really in trouble, they're acutely suicidal, they try to get the police to shoot them. And this person was in a room talking with police officers about that. And the police officer and the person with mental illness, they were both able to share what it was like on either side of an exchange like that. And so that's what I want you to remember, that we can have a lot of happy endings when we provide people with the types of resources where when confronted with a situation like that, they have the specialized skills, they have the resources, and they have the partnerships to get people that need help, truly the help that they need, rather than a quick trip to jail or not being served at all. So thank you so much for allowing me the time, and thank you guys again so much for everything that you do.
I have a question.
Sure.
So what's the specialized training and the specialized skills that the officers would have or partake in?
Okay, so, well, that would certainly need to be worked out in a comprehensive training plan, which I know that the department has, we've had some conversation about some things that could look like. So what we would want to do are things like, how do you recognize when someone has a mental illness and their behavior is probably driven by mental illness and it's not just non-compliance? Then we would do specialized training in de-escalation. So approaching a person in a way that encourages them to comply without the use of force. Our team actually provides that training now to some cadets at Mercyhurst, so we have some experience with that. We also help to train some new officers for other departments. So de-escalation, recognizing mental illness, knowing resources, recognizing drug and alcohol concerns, recognizing those resources. Our goal is to get people plugged into treatment versus incarceration.
Okay, absolutely. So one more question.
Sure.
So as far as de-escalation training, and you do that for police officers?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, okay. So from a mental health standpoint, you know, the data says, you know, once you introduce a police officer with a gun and a vest, that it changes the dynamics of the situation as far as being able to de-escalate it as from a mental health standpoint. So how do you plan to bridge that gap, or is that something that's being looked at?
I think that's a great question, and that's why police right now, so the state even is encouraging that police officers get training in diversity, handling vulnerable populations, and this whole idea of de-escalation strategies. So actually, when I saw Tom Lennox come into the room today, I actually shared with him that the last time I saw him in the field, we were both at St. Vincent's Hospital. I can't remember what I was doing there. I was helping someone. Tom was there with his partner, and what I remember is we were both standing in triage, and Tom was getting a person to talk to him about her drug use. And he's so good, and I remember thinking, I wish every crisis worker sounded like Tom Lennox does. So there's a way that, you know, we can teach people to use skills like motivational interviewing to encourage people to be more cooperative versus more of a commanding, sort of domineering presence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Yes, that's,
Good evening. I'm Stacy Bittner. I'm the Program Director of Crisis Services here, a part of Safe Harbor. And so I would definitely reinforce everything that Mandy had shared as far as the concern for our team's safety when they're out in the community. I just wanted to also paint a picture about what our teams are up against, what they're dealing with in our community. Our staff currently are seeing about over 300 face-to-face visits with individuals in our community per month. Each month, we on average are getting about 55 police triages, so that means that police are arriving on scene. They're noticing some type of behavioral health need, and they're contacting us to partner with them to have that collaboration. That really isn't including all of the calls that we're actually reaching out to the police to respond with us. When we do that, it's because the individual either has a history of aggression, might have access to weapons on their, with them or in their home, currently intoxicated or under the influence, and so really we are contacting the police to ensure our staff's safety, and that we can then collaborate together to help address the person's need and get them to a safe place. So we also work very closely with the police to serve 302s. So that's the involuntary examination of the hospital for behavioral health needs. So oftentimes we might be contacting the police to go and do that initial outreach because we're unable to reach that person by phone, so we want to see them face to face. After we do assist the person in the community with petitioning that 302, the police are actually a part of that to help serve it. They do provide the transportation for that person to the hospital, and also, again, are there to ensure our safety. And really just wanting to advocate again for the crisis vehicles to come back. So that was before my time in crisis, but we have had some staff who have remained in crisis for all this time and have just continued to share and really praise, you know, the great work that was done when the crisis vehicles were in existence. Again, just the earlier recognition of behavioral health concerns when an officer's on scene, earlier response time would really be beneficial to getting that person into the right care that is needed. And of course, with those trained officers, enhanced collaboration that would happen between our departments is really what we want to see. It's just that the care of the individuals in our community is enhanced by that partnership.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Linda Markle and I'm from Erie County Care Management. And I've been in the mental health field for about 30 plus years now, and I recall when there was the first unit on the streets that I think it was called 201 that was assigned to respond to human services calls, we'll call that. Today at Erie County Care Management, we are the individuals who go into the prison to see people who are seriously mentally ill that are incarcerated, individuals who are on probation, individuals coming out of state prisons on parole or maxing out, and all of these individuals are seriously mentally ill. And one of our goals would be to partner again with the police department, because if we can impact at the moment of contact and have a different outcome other than going to the jail, that would be huge. We currently have in the Erie County Prison at this point in time probably 15 people waiting for treatment. You cannot get treatment in the Erie County Prison. If you don't want treatment, you don't, you know, they don't have the ability to force medications. They don't have the ability, you know, they're just not equipped to do those types of things. And so we would like to see, we think that this would be part of how we can somehow partner together to intervene prior to somebody going to the jail. And this is the only way that we could intervene effectively for individuals who may, you know, there was a woman, an intellectually disabled, mentally ill woman who was homeless and was in somebody's backseat of their car. Unfortunately, when she was approached, you know, she was psychotic. She ended up in the jail for extensive periods of time, months, because she refused treatment, and she was charged with, you know, assault on a police officer, you know, some really serious things. However, if there could be an approach, as Mandy talked about, and, you know, education around how to approach individuals in a different manner, the outcome would probably be much different, and we would affect a lot more programs, especially those in homeless, those in the prison system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening again. John Bookman with the Erie Downtown Partnership, 140 East 5th Street here near downtown Erie. I've had the honor and the privilege to work downtown for the past 10 plus years, servicing the many business and property owners and residents in downtown. And what we've seen this past year is the pandemic has truly put an increased demand on an already stressed system. It was a different, higher level of aggressiveness and frequency of which our team and many others experienced. The shuttered businesses that were forced saw within the downtown community the increased litter, the illegal dumping, the human waste, and mostly the illicit behavior that was occurring on a daily basis. Police presence is vital for the success of downtown Erie and for the Erie community as a whole. Each week we receive countless calls and emails from business and property owners, sleeping in doorways, vandalism, defecation, urination, and more. frustration to the point where business owners are looking to leave downtown. Right now, people need to be safe in order to feel safe. Perception is a reality. We are experiencing a significant amount of investment in downtown we've not seen this for at least a generation, a significant amount. These critical ARP funds are needed at this time. Streetscape improvements, businesses, parks, and police. These are all needed to create our world-class downtown in Bayfront. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else willing to speak at this time?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Gerald Craig. I'm with the Blue Coats Nonviolence Initiative. And first of all, I'm glad to be a part of this conversation, and even more glad to learn of the intention of the police department to come up with a different and better way of policing our juveniles. I really was impacted by the word diversion. The diversion tactics to try to keep these kids out of the system. I would say at a time like now more than ever, this conversation is long overdue. What we're seeing going on with the youth in our city today is unheard of. Now, most of you who have been involved with me through the Unified Erie meetings, police community relationship meeting, will know that I've been sounding this alarm about our juveniles for last 3 or 4 years, that the age dynamic in some of our more violent crimes was spiraling downward. And now we have the evidence, 13-year-olds being chased down and murdered, right? So this is a segment of our population that I would say is greatly underserved and greatly in need of the attention that is being planned here or talked about being planned here today. So as far as our participation and what we're seeing on a daily basis, I have to say it's really, really frightening. If there's one thing that I would add as far as the plan, I think it's a great plan, the mental health aspect of it for our juveniles. I haven't heard much anybody speak on that. But what is the intention to get our juveniles the mental health help that they need? I mean, some of the things that we're experiencing at the schools, outside in the community, is so bizarre and so, I don't even know if there's a word for it, it's just so out there, if I could say it like that, that it's almost like we need mental health workers to walk the streets in our community at time, I believe. We plan to, as part of our walking school bus program that we have initiated with McKinley School and through the United Way, we're adding some caseworkers to go out with us from some of the family, the family care center, places like that that deal with the student population, just so that we can kind of like break the ice with different families in the community, that they might be a little bit more approachable by seeing that these people come with good intentions and come to help instead of to harm. And I think that's something that the police department could also consider, having these types of individuals along with them as they address these situations with our juveniles. And last thing, that's my alarm, I must need to shut up. Last thing I would say, the truancy issue. I've never seen this many kids walking out to school. I mean, just walking out through the day, and they're terrorizing the neighborhood up there. I'm sure your phone is blowing off the hook with the calls from up by the store up in the 30th Street, Maple Street area. And they're coming to us for help, and there's only so much we can do once they leave off of school property. So I love the whole idea, I love the plan, and I'm just hoping that this will come into fruition very soon. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Rob, questions
Thank you.
after him?
Now, I just want to say that I'm aware of everything that you have gotten into, and you're doing an outstanding job, sir. And I appreciate you very much.
Thank you, sir.
You know, I totally agree.
So I agree, and I also agree that there needs to be greater support systems in place. However, though, whether you use data from the school to the prison pipeline or any other associated data, that earlier contact with the police for a juvenile does not change the directory, the trajectory of the juvenile per se. And so I, definitely think that the right people are in the room, but we also have to be cognizant that, that those things as they are now don't have the determinant that we are like or that the people in the room are asking. And so there's a lot of work to be done if we're gonna take this holistic approach. Personally, I want my police to police.
Absolutely.
And so the people in the room, I spoke earlier to some of the people out in the field, not these ones here, but about, about the assistance piece, about, just, and this is bad, but, we get the price of 4 social workers for the price of 1 Erie police officer. And I think that that's the place where we need to build capacity about where we get the best bang for our buck. But I thank you for all you're doing and for that you're in the schools and you're helping the kids. And so I wish you well, sir.
Well, now that you responded, let me respond to that.
Yes,
First
sir.
of all, I'm a fierce opponent of the school to prison pipeline. If you listen to my statement, you heard what spurred me to come up here was the word diversion.
Absolutely, sir.
One of the things I respect about the Erie Police Department is that they've done since the inception of the Blue Coats. Oftentimes when you guys have showed up, you've always allowed us the opportunity to diffuse the situation first. And it's only if it's gotten out of hand where they have stepped in. So we are never advocates for children being arrested. Don't get that twisted.
I never said that,
that ain't what I'm saying. Okay, and I don't want it to be printed or said. Let's make sure that goes out. Our job is to prevent them from being needed with the juveniles. They allow us that, but they also allow us the comfort of knowing that if things get out of hand, that we'll all be safe. Now that's the key word to all of this. We live in a very violent society today. And some of those that are committing these acts of violence, unfortunately, are our children today. And so the discussion about juveniles has to stay on the table. It's not something that we want to be having. I don't think nobody want to talk about kids going to jail, kids needing police attention. But when you look at the news and you ride through our community, and that's not just Erie. This is all over the United States of America. I'm aware of this. But without all of us, as you said earlier, playing our part, meaning the police have a part too.
Oh, absolutely.
They definitely have a part too. We're not going to stop that. And lastly, let's not forget this. COVID, we have COVID anxiety, COVID depression, COVID frustration or whatever, right? So do these kids, right? So this is why the mental health piece has to stay on the table. I like the direction they're going with the diversion tactics, but I also like the direction they're going with saying we need to give this some attention as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy, is anybody else talk or can we ask this question?
Police officer.
I did my fault. Everybody else got to ask Brother D a question, so.
Sure.
I do have a question for you, Brother D.
ma'am.
When you talk about prevention, if you were in charge of the world, what other prevention would there be before you get to the point where kids are truant from school? What other, not something maybe that the Blue Coats would do, but what else are we missing in the community?
If I were in charge of the world.
Yeah, we're in charge of the world.
Wow.
President D.
Boy, wouldn't that be something? But really, I would be proactive at every opportunity when it comes to our kids. I did not believe we should have brought our kids back from COVID en masse, as a whole, without first vetting them. I didn't believe that they were ready to be right back in a structured environment without first de-escalating what they had been through. Let's find out how they feel. How were they impacted? And so at every turn, if there's an opportunity to be proactive, I say we take it. The Pell program, I'd like to see that expand. The Pell program did a world of good for me in the city of Buffalo, New York. It brought my horizon, brought my perspective, taught me some discipline, and it gave me a place to go that I didn't have to be in the streets. And I had an opportunity to see these guys in another life. And so there's so many things that I believe should be put in place. I think there should be more people at the table for this discussion. You know what I mean? From the community aspect, I would like to see the Erie School District here.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, because I think you're right. I think that teachers would have a really interesting perspective on this, and your idea of, putting ourselves in the shoes of kids who have been out, and then you just immediately go back. I know that I had, you're mentioning COVID, and I was riding my bike home from city council, something here a couple weeks ago, and I came upon some kids. There was something going on. There was somebody yelling at them, and I thought something was going to escalate. And it just, when you talk about bizarre behavior, they said something to me about, I was going to give them COVID, and I said, no, I'm vaccinated, and then they said, well, it's just a fake thing anyhow, and I was like, and we know what that vaccination rate is in the poorest zip code in Erie, is 32%. So you're allowing me to segue into my soapbox here. One thing that I think would be really helpful, the police chief knows that when we were meeting weekly and doing briefings, I kept saying, what's the vaccination rate for the police force? It was about 52%. Think about the modeling that could be done if the Erie Police Force stepped up and said, we're all going to get vaccinated, and we're going to figure out how to help that vaccination rate in 16503 get up from the horrible, horrible percentage of 32%. Think about that. You can model things in lots of different ways. Think about, I'm giving that challenge to the police chief now to see if that can be done. I would love to see the police step forward and say, we're vaccinated, this is why you should be vaccinated too, because it's a huge issue in that poor zip code.
I agree with you. Let's not forget they did go out with us when we handed out 10,000 masks in 16503 community week. The police department went out with us, the fire department went out. This was a city effort, a team effort, and I would say that it was successful. In fact, we handed out 20,000 masks, and I believe we knocked on about 10,000 doors. We hit this city like a swarm of bees, and it was all of us together that did it. So, yeah.
I know, and the reason I bring this up is that we had another ARP meeting earlier today, and James Sherrod from the Martin Luther King Center asked about whether there could be ARP money to help get that vaccination rate up. So, it's bubbling up there. So I like the idea what you said, having more people at the table, and then let's figure out how we can all become models on this. Because you're right, you have the success of the masking program. You have something to build on.
Thank you. Do we have anyone online that wishes to speak at this time, Frank?
Good job.
think there's two. Well, he's got to get John up and
Hello, good evening. Very blessed and fortunate to be here. I'll try to be brief. I know the chief is going to give me the hurry up sign. But real quick, I mean, I'm excited to talk about this tonight because I think on, excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry. Sergeant Tom Lennox, City of Erie Police Department. You know, I'm really excited to talk about this because this hits four major topics that I know that directly affected me throughout my career. When I look at 2005, you know, as the chief said, we had 209 officers, all right? I was one of the casualties of the layoffs back in 2005. And upon my return, I remember thinking, you know, there was 173, 174 of us, and there were a lot of these units that were put in place. The Family Crisis Unit, K-9 Unit, our Juvenile Division was up and running, and how this all ties in is, you know, one of my first jobs out of college is I worked for Crisis Services for 2 years before I did anything else. So back then, I remember the Gulf Unit, the Family Crisis Unit, always coming over to that location. And why that's important is, you know, it establishes the continuity not only with the mental health agencies and gets officers familiar with the system, but it also allows officers to get more educated thoroughly on the referrals that they can provide to that segment of our community, which is extremely high. And Mr. Keys, just to answer your question, and you're right, you know, most of the time, you know, when people see officers, that's the first thing they're drawn to. I know working with kids every day, it's the first thing that they do. Hey, why do you wear a gun? Why do you have a badge on? Do you have to wear? But through time, and the mental health community is no different. They get past that. I remember the relationship with the Family Crisis Unit to where when they would go out into the community, they knew these officers on a first name basis because that's what they were dealing with all three shifts. You know, it allows officers in crisis services the ability to follow up with their clients and reassure that the mental health clients are following through with their outpatient services. I mean, a lot, you know, being that we're doing more with less right now, you know, I mean, unfortunately, the mental health community, they're not calling the social service agencies. The police are the first ones that they call. And I think it was Mandy that said, and this is a real thing, you know, where officers are on a call, they might be dealing with somebody in actual crisis that, you know, when there are safety issues going in, you know, another call might go out for a shots fired, a homicide, a robbery in progress, and you got to ask yourself, is that person, that person that's exhibiting a mental health crisis, are they truly getting the 100% service for that particular call? Or are those officers just moving on and going to the priority call, which is more the violent call? So that's what we're talking about here. It gives our mental health community a sense that officers care about their well-being. In addition, it allows the officers to stay proactive and to determine if, you know, that mental health patient, I mean, you get so familiar with these, with that community that officers, and Sergeant Russo worked a lot of years in the mental health community, and he could attest to this, that you know, just based on the familiarity of that community of whether or not they're taking their medication as they're supposed to. You know, hey, Mr. Keys, you're a little off today. You know, did you take your Lexapro? Did you take, you know, so it becomes familiar with these officers that are working in that unit to almost, that they identify almost like their family. I mean, there's just a familiarity to that. Officers can get them through the door with services a lot quicker, and it kind of eliminates that revolving door of what are we going to do with them as a police department? Are they going to go to jail, or are they going to go to the hospital? You know, so with this unit, it gives that community so much more that the police actually do care. You know, that they do care about my long game, about getting services and maintaining those type of services put in place. It gives our frontline officers and the Family Crisis Unit officers more options. With regards to the training, and I know I talked to Mandy a little bit about this the last few weeks, there's this thing called a DSM-4. If you're not familiar with the mental health system, you know, that's kind of like the mental health Bible. Am I right? You know, so our officers that are on the front line, you know, they don't have, I don't want to say they don't have the time, but they don't have the time or the training to go through that DSM-4, which makes them a little bit more apt to identifying what mental health crisis or what mental health problem that particular person that they're dealing with is actually going through. 2 days of suicide prevention training, mental health training with regards to detecting mental health and drug and alcohol. You know, what came first, the mental health or was it the drug and alcohol? You know, with this unit, these guys can laser in on those type of issues and to make an easier decision on what road are we going, with jail not being the last option. Mental Health Procedures Training Act, or the Mental Health Procedures Act training. I mean, that's pretty extensive, where if you ask the majority of our guys in our department, they don't know what that is. You know, that there is an actual, you know, act that they, you know, have to follow with regards to their rights. And that takes time to learn that. Shadow in the field with crisis, OCY, GCAC, Adult Protective Services, SafeNet, the CAC, shelters, truly learning the systems and its processes, not going from this call and immediately going to another call, because that is what's demanded upon us officers. Basic mental health training, de-escalation, I know Mandy mentioned that, interacting with individuals with substance abuse, trauma-informed training, that's another thing, you know, and Darryl hit the nail right on the head. I mean, there's a lot of our kids in our community that you don't know what the traumas that they're going through at that time. And I think this unit allows these officers to explore those things a little bit more. I mean, we've been doing PALS for 5 or 6 years, and it's crazy how much these kids will open up to you. Now imagine you have officers in a unit that's all that they're doing. You know, officers assigned to that crisis unit gives them more thorough training and expertise with dealing with that community. Juvenile probation, and I'll just briefly go over this. Again, I was blessed before I became a police officer. I worked in that system for 7 years. And most people think that, you know, hey, and I know that's going to be what's on the surface, that we're putting kids in the system rather than helping them out. That is not, that's one of the biggest misconceptions of, you know, because as a probation officer, when I worked over there, there were more kids that you diverted, diversion programs, getting them in, their foot in the door, okay, to be able to make those recommendations and to be able to nip things in the bud before they get a little bit more violent. I mean, juvenile probation, and I know Chief Mary Jo Battle, you know, it used to be, back in the day when the juvenile division was in, they would make referrals to these diversion programs. They would do a thing called peer jury, to where kids would come in and the kids their age would actually ultimately make the decision whether or not, how do we hold this juvenile accountable? What do you think they need? And it was more of a partnership between EPD and juvenile probation. You know, then there's things called informal adjustments, consent decrees, with the last resort being a kid that was adjudicated delinquent. That's a smaller percentage than most of the public realizes. That is the last resort. And then placement going a step beyond that, all right? And most of the placements that these kids are going to, it's rehabilitative in nature, not punitive, if that makes sense. And I think by adding that juvenile division allows us to become a little bit more of a bridge gapper between us and probation, and we will be able to make recommendations to probation, making it more rehabilitative rather than punitive. Bottom line, juvenile division will allow the system to intervene, get juveniles and encourage them to get them on the right path before there's more serious crimes that are going to be committed as they get older. These kids need that intervention, I'm telling you. You know, when I got back to this department, the two biggest communities I thought they got lost because we were so shorthanded, mental health and juveniles. It was almost, they were the forgotten segments of our community. Lastly, as far as the ask, okay, my interpretation is, and I'm very proud of our department, being that we have done more with less. But I can tell you that, it's at that burnout rate where we can't almost function, and this is a reality, and there are a lot of guys that want to do more, that want to take a little bit more time with the kids, want to take a little bit more time with the mental health community. Our diverse recruitment is at an all-time high, and you guys are going to see that this year. Pretty excited about that. Community policing, it's obviously exceeding expectations with Officer Russo, myself, and 77 officers involved. I'm proud to say that our training is one of the best in the state of Pennsylvania, period. I've researched this. In conclusion, I think it's our responsibility to revisit these lost communities that has happened because of us being so short. I mean, I think we don't raise the standard, we gotta continue to be the standard. And the blueprint for other communities looking in and saying, what is the city of Erie doing? Community policing, check. Increasing diversity, check. They actually have a mental health unit in this department, check. They got a juvenile division, check. What are they doing right up there in Erie that we can try and model? And I think this would be a great opportunity, to make our department and make this city a lot safer, making sure our mental health community is getting the true help that they need, not just putting Band-Aids on it, linking them up with crisis services and other outpatient agencies that all of our guys don't even know that's available. But with this unit, they will. So in conclusion, I just think we're widening the pie in other segments of our department that we can't continue to take away, pull from like other priorities such as our violent crime, mental health. It's got to be equally divided and split up. So that's it. Wasn't that long?
I wanted to ask you a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we talked about the mental health aspect, but we also end off, Brother D talked about, who's not at the table, broadening the conversation. We have people from Safe Harbor, but if my understanding is correct, it's also become hard about where you can take people for mental health evaluations. Units started closing down. I don't know if that coincided with cuts in the police. Is there a gap in where someone would be taken for mental health treatment? And I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to COVID again. There was just a story in the paper. We know that the ERs are overwhelmed, partly because of COVID, but actually, I was at the ER a week and a half ago, and there was somebody in there who was with a police officer, but, long waits in the ER. So is that another gap for somebody else who should be at the table? Where does somebody go if there is a mental health issue, where they shouldn't be at the ER, but they should be somewhere else? Is that your experience, that there's also a shortage of resources there? And I don't know if you or the other mental health people who can help answer that.
Well, I think the mental health person should probably take that one, but thank you for your time. And
Thank you. I think it is a very good question. And Erie is very fortunate that we have a very robust continuum of care. I think what we're talking about tonight is a lot of emergency situations that have risen to the level that it's an emergency. But we've also been talking to the police department about what about those non-emergency services. We do have a lot of services that are available. Prior to COVID, we had outpatient facilities for the kids in each of the school district, or each of the school buildings in the Erie City School District, as well as a lot of the outlying areas as well. We have SAP programs that are available in the school. We have other diversion programs too. We have services that are available for adults. We've started long-term structured residential programs, acute partial programs, residential treatment or partial programs for adults as well as kids. The services are available there. During the pandemic, yes, there have been longer wait lists. There have been staffing shortages, which have caused a lot of different crises. We also know that instead of a smaller portion of the population struggling, that it's a wide overarching struggle of the entire community. So meeting all of those needs is difficult. So we are trying to continue to do that. For those who are community-based workers, and I know that Brother D also mentioned this too, having the safety, being able to send the Office of Children and Youth staff out to try and do some of those prevention things when they don't feel safe. You know, people don't want their children and the people that are coming out of college to be working in the community, to go out to meet those people where they're at if they're not safe. So in order to provide more of those services in the community base, because we know people don't always have transportation in order to get to services. They don't have the time. It's difficult to take a bus to an hour-long appointment and then take a bus back. So we have been trying to really provide those services in the community. We do have a lot of opportunities for feedback from the community for expansion of services. We work very closely with our managed care partner, Community Care Behavioral Health, in order to make sure that we have that community. We do geo-access reports in order to assure that we do have services in all of the areas that we need to. We look at the zip codes and the utilization, as well as our the amount of eligible people within those zip codes. There's lots of data that's available out there. We have started more of a sharing of that process too, because when you can only hit the top of your list every day, you don't get down to best practice. So what we really want to do is move from just taking everything off of the hottest burner on the stove to getting to more of a best practice scenario where we're able to, again, meet people where they're at, provide them the linkage to the services that are available, to have people have the knowledge and understanding of those services to get them where they need to be, and to have the people providing them feel safe when they're doing it.
Thank you. Stacy, was that 300 calls, did you say, at the beginning of your speech?
We actually have 300 face-to-face visits with our crisis staff each month. And also the
staff.
I apologize.
How many counselors?
So when we're fully staffed, we have 15 staff who would provide the direct care, go out into the community and see individuals in that capacity.
Okay, so without me grabbing my calculator, what's that caseload?
So we actually, so kind of as Lana had described, really we do a triage. You know, we are prioritizing cases. So if, you know, police call, that's a priority one, we're going to go right away because there's something more emergent in nature. Depending on what that person's risk level is, if they're having thoughts of suicide, if they're able to stay safe, do they have supports, what other type of symptoms do they have, we do provide like a priority ranking system. So really we are dispatching as we're able to and really have done a pretty good job. You know, we of course strive for meeting our response time 100%. We consistently for the past several months have been at like 98, 99% that we're meeting all of that triage response in a timely manner. So it's not so much of like a caseworker, like one person has this many cases, but again, we can go anywhere to 10 different individuals per day, face to face. One more question. Since we have a lot of behavioral health people here, we have the police here, we have counsel. But anyways, so in your ideal world, what does this partnership look like? Because some would, in my opinion, you know, I agree with, you know, Brother D that we need more boots on the ground, more counselors, more therapists, more mentors, more, because when you talk about crime, and you talk about crime prevention, you have to look at the things that actually do prevent, you know, crime. You know, things for people to do, you know, places for people to go. You know, they say, you know, idle hands is the devil's workshop, and I think that during the pandemic, we had a lot of idle hands, a lot of over access to the internet and other things that have led to, you know, the spike in, you know, in crime and in incidents and, as you know, in behavioral health. And so I just wonder what's in the, you know, what does this look like in your ideal solution, either of you?
I think having, obviously, I think identifying the needs of the community. Yeah, having the resources available, having people understand what those resources are and how to access them, and then making sure that people get there and being able to follow up. So a lot of it is making sure that we've got that strong continuum, which I do believe that we have in Erie County, getting those people to the right services. And I think the partnership that we're talking about, it builds on the things that we already have. We know that we stress out the police and the law enforcement community because of our growing needs as well. Again, it's kind of preventing those things. So addressing the emergency needs while we also continue to, for the non-emergency needs, the officers can link back to us so that we can provide some of those case management, go out, engage with those folks, get them into services. So it's not the police officers seeing them every day. It's police officers seeing them, letting us know about it, getting them and linking up to those services, having them be active and be successful in those services, and really getting on a pathway to a better life for everybody. But anyway.
Oh, okay. And then whatever you want to add. I think for me, the ideal here is that we keep more people out of jail. I think we build on what already is working because we have a lot of great stuff to build on. This is just a way to enhance that. I think it's getting people into treatment in the most trauma-informed way, starting as far upstream as possible so we're not coercing people or they're not having to go because they were court-ordered to. I also want to add here that there's a benefit to law enforcement, okay? So if you're a police officer in this country, you're actually more likely to die by suicide than you are a line-of-duty death. And so providing people with resources that makes them feel good about their job. I've never met a police officer that has said, well, I became a cop so I can fight with people all the time. Most of the time you ask them and they say, well, I want to help people, I want to protect people, I want to keep my community safe. So again, giving people the tools to do the job that I think most of them have the goal to do. I think we also, it's like win-win, the community wins, and we have a healthier police department because they're better able to achieve their goals in a safer way, both physically and psychologically.
I'd like to take a minute to single out Officer Tom. The other guys that are involved with the young community are here to thank also. But for the rest of your life, you can be impacted by those kids that are falling in love with you with the little programs that you work with. I get a little part of that as a teacher, where somebody will come up and say, remember me? I don't, because they look a whole lot different. But falling, I'll never forget Ike Battles. He was a policeman on Tampa State. Every Cub kid knew him, and he knew what was going on pretty much on State Street. We can't do that, we know that. But boy, the Pally and what you're doing with the young kids, totally impressed me. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other officers who wish to speak?
Yeah, one more. Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Sergeant Jamie Russo. I've been with the City of Erie Police Department for approximately 20 years. Sergeant Lennox added a lot of good perspective, but what I want to share with you today is a little bit different. I have a unique perspective with the Mental Health Association and the mental health population within Erie, because prior to me being a police officer, I worked for, this is like 25, 30 years ago, with a lot of individuals here at Case Management Support Services as an intensive case manager. Well, my job was we were integrating, bringing clients out of the Warren State Hospital, because at one point in time they were kind of forgotten about over there. So my job as an intensive case manager is to integrate them from Warren State Hospital back into the City of Erie community and surrounding areas, wrap them with services, and provide intensive case management. But during my many years of working there, I had an opportunity to work with crisis services on a daily basis, and we were on call 24/7 for this population. Also, I had an opportunity to work with our crisis car. So going out on nights, to do an assessment or whatnot, I was there and saw how both parties interacted along with the job that I had to do. Many years later, I became a police officer, so I was able to represent not only the mental health community who worked with those populations, but on the other side. And I know data suggests when an officer comes on the scene and they see a firearm or a uniform, that it may obviously enhance the situation, I might say. But what that probably doesn't say is, when I first got on the street as a rookie, I was very in tune with the population of clientele that we had from our like we call them clients, from the mental health population. When I arrived on scene, I had already developed a rapport with them. They knew me. They knew me as Jamie Russo, not Officer Russo. The relationships that myself, Sergeant Lennox established with that clientele during those times was crucial because we were able to resolve that situation, diffuse the situation just by our relationship alone. That carried on many years while I was on the street. Now I'm not on the street as much anymore. The population's kind of changed a little bit, but one thing that doesn't change is the relationships. When Crisis Services was there, my first few years on the job, we had them. I worked hand in hand with them because I was very familiar with that population. But for new officers who come out on the street, you got guys 20-some years old who've never had any type of formal job at one point. This may be their first job. So when Crisis Services would come in and handle a call, with the relationships that they had with the clientele, they knew them. They knew their family. They were able to come in and help the newer officers, teach them how to be safe. I think the relationships and the familiarity between the officers and the clientele, the mental health community, by having a crisis services and having those relationships and have that familiarity provides a safer environment, not just for the community, but for the officer, which is super important. And also the staff, crisis services, everybody who deals with the mental health population. I'd be remiss to say it, I think it's real important. I think the city has taken a step back. I know we had to in 2005 or whatnot when we had to cut back officers. That's just how it was back then, Act 47. Above my pay grade, I was just a new officer just trying to make my bones on the street. But with this opportunity, I just want to speak personally of this opportunity. I think this opportunity will provide there's a dire need for this type of service. We need specialized officers who are highly trained, who will develop relationships with this community. I also run the community outreach program, COP, and part of that is we have a downtown patrol, okay, with 2 guys on bikes. Unfortunately, God rest his soul, we lost Officer Belton this year, who is an integral part of that team. Those guys did an amazing job. They were out there every day interacting with that population. And a lot of times that population are our mental health consumers. And we attempted to reach out, provide services for them, offer them, whether it be a VA, if you need to go to the hospital, shelter, whatever it may be. We do go on a lot of calls with crisis services, and they're amazing. We work well with them. I think even better when we get specific officers who are going to be highly trained in the unit to work with them, it'll even be a better success. But we also are out there, every officer knows when we're out on the street, there are many, many calls, a lot more that we are going to be responding to with the mental health community that we don't have crisis services there. It's just a young officer trying to figure out, what do I do? Now these calls will be more designated towards a highly trained unit. So that's, I could go on for a long time. I think you guys got the gist of it. But what I would say is this. 2005, unfortunately, the city was having hard times. And the only way I'm going to plead my case is make an analogy. In 2005, we had to do what we had to do. And what we did was cut back, scale back, but we met the bare bones providing services to the city. And we did it, and we did it well, because I was out there doing it every day. And I would argue with anybody that we didn't. But that was 2005. Our cell phone in 2005 was what, a flip phone? Okay. We're 2021 now, we're still operating at the exact same numbers we did in 2005. So think about the changes that have been done. Populations have changed, violent crime has changed, society has changed. We wouldn't want to be out there, nobody here has a flip phone, I imagine. Well, maybe. Just joking. But we need to adjust with the times, our community, and how everything is evolving. And you can also see the big push with the mental health community, with caseworkers and police. This is going to give you best of both worlds. I understand what you're saying, more bang for your buck, but at what cost? You have 5 caseworkers out there. The mental health community can be a very dangerous community. I myself have dealt with that many times. So this will give you the best of both worlds, not only a highly trained officer, but somebody who can also help provide safety to the public. And if anybody has any questions, I'll sit down. I'll take any more time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Would we please have John Zillow next?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm here at home, folks.
We can hear you.
Okay, this is John Villa with the Neighborhood Resource Organization, Mercyhurst University, and the coordinator for Snoop's Neighborhood Watch Group for the last 25 years. Everything that the chief has stated is completely true. I mean, the bottom line is we need more officers on the street. We need guys in the cars. We need more people on the neighborhood action team, which is one of the best specialized units that's out there. They come to the neighborhood watch meetings. They take requests from people at the meetings. They do different things that the regular patrol guys just don't have the time to do. And without having them, and I know the chief said that they're undermanned, they can't be in the whole city. They need to be in certain sectors all the time, and they can't do that. And that's a lot of the problem with the inner city right now. There's just not enough coverage of these specialized units to take care of the inner city. The whole complement's down. These guys are getting tired. You can see it. You can just see it in them. I mean, they're running day to day, night to night. That's really all I got to say. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Thank you, John. I think
You're
we'll
welcome.
call Lipton Water next if we don't have any questions for John. Thank you, John.
Welcome.
You got the good luck chairs? The good luck chairs.
Okay. I guess we could have some of these guys. I guess the question now is, what's this going to cost? Yes.
Did I hear correctly that, and I don't know that we were ever informed, the new contract with police is 8 years?
Correct, yes.
Did anybody on city council know that it was 8 years for the new contract? I don't remember.
Chris, it's the one that says ARP funding. I don't remember years.
Is that unusual to have an 8 year?
Yes. Yes.
That would have been nice to have that communicated.
Should be up there.
Here's extra copies.
We can go over that if anybody wants.
Well, everybody's talking about money. Chief, what kind of a timeline do we have to get these 21 officers on board?
That's it.
Do we have a qualified pool out there?
Well, that's what I was gonna talk about, Ed, for a second.
Oh.
Or do you want, Ann, do you want, well, I was gonna say, the list that's in existence right now is brand new. We just hired some officers off of it. There would be enough that we would probably get down to about 35, which is about half of the list. And in there would be approximately 7 or 8 minorities potentially hired for this. But time-wise, it would take for backgrounds and the training, we'd have to stagger them. We can't bring on more than 9 employees at once. So we'd space them out over every 2 months. We'd hire a batch. But it would take about half the year just to get them up and running.
Get them running.
I guess you're on 20, are you bringing new officers for these exact positions, or existing officers are going to go for those positions and you need people to fill the back? Because, of course, these positions are different, there's different type of a skill, and they're going to be trained differently. I'm just wondering.
Right, the officers would be hired as backfilling. We would post them through the union jobs so that the officers that want to do these kind of positions. Mental health is very difficult. Not all officers are wired like Tom and Ruth and Jamie. So we would post it, the new hires would be filling in as new employees.
I have a question to you. So is there already a set, what would be the minimum qualifications for somebody going to the crisis car?
Well, Tom and Jamie have been working on what our SOP would be if this unit came to be. They've also working on what the training requirements would be for that. We'll be partnering with the other agencies. They have some classes already. There's other things that Tom and Jamie have talked about because of their hands-on experience. And it's something we're developing right now, so we would be ready in the next 6 months to go operational.
Chief Dan, are we able to be privy to the amount of police officers who will retire in 2022?
Paul tells me that on average, 8 officers retire a year. That's about average. Right now, we're experiencing a little bit higher turnover. I have, I think, 9 officers that have come to me that are leaving in the next 8 months.
And that average, Kathy, goes back about 10 to 12 years. And the reason we can't tell you exactly is some officers jump into what's called the drop program. So we know they're going to leave, but others may just decide at any point in time, today's my last day. So you really don't know when that's going to happen.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to where the handout I gave everybody, the top of the handout shows, and Dan and I talked about this, how we can do this financially. The top's unrealistic, but I just thought everybody should see what it would cost if we were to hire 1 officer, 9 officers, 12 officers, 15, or 21 right on January 1st, and they stayed for all 5 years of the availability of the ARP program money. Down below, it shows that if we were to hire 9 guys or girls, it would be $7 million. If we were to hire 10 officers, 10 million, or 12 officers, $10 million, and so on. So, but again, unrealistic, as the chief said, with all the background checks and everything that has to be done, that's not feasible. So, we tried to put together, the chief and I, Chris, if you could move that down just a hair. The second scenario is what the chief talked about, is hiring some people as soon as possible, maybe staggering in 9 or so in April, May, June, and then getting a few more by the fall. Those are the dollar amounts. And again, as we talked about last night, I don't know what the MMO is going to be in 3 years, and I don't know what health insurance is going to be in 3 years. But we have pretty good statistical data, so we kind of use that information in the cost of what an officer would be. We know salary-wise what it's going to be, but some of the peripherals are pretty good give and takes. So, you're also going to have to outfit these officers. Chief said we're probably going to need 1 frontline vehicle. We're probably going to need 3 detective cars. As you know, we get the interceptors for the frontline vehicles. We outfit those things. They're about $55,000 with everything in there. Detective cars, a little cheaper. We've been using the Explorers with some of the upfitting they need. They're about $35,000 out the door there. So that's what the white area on the side, the cost of outfitting and the cost of vehicles. But down below, where the yellow box is, that's what it's going to cost us for about the next 5 years, staggering these people in and then moving it out until the end of the program. So if we were to hire 21, which we put in the budget, and everybody looks at the police department budget and the people pages, you'll see that there were 21 added. Over the next 5 years, that's going to cost us about $14 million. If we were to hire 15, and we costed that one out, obviously, because that's what the chief is asking for, 21 people. 15 people, about $10 million, 12 people, about $8 million.
If we're using ARP money, why do we have 196 officers in the budget?
Well, because they're paid out of the general fund, and then the general fund is reimbursed. If you look at page 17 of your budget, the revenue budget book, there is a reimbursement of about $2.5 million this year from the ARP money to pay for the new officers. It's a pass-through because the police department is in the general fund, so that's where you have to pay for them.
You have to show
Yes, correct.
So Paul, when would the $14 million hit?
That would be, if, as you're asking about all 21, that would be over the next 5 years.
Over 5 years.
Yes, and that would be in that neighborhood of spending. And again, depending on when the chief finds availability to bring people in and when they can move around, and that's about it.
But won't we have to know what the contract says for 8 years to, I mean.
Well, we followed the salary scale for those 5 years for a newbie, because he's gonna hire new people.
All right, so what is the, you know, what is it gonna be the average salary then?
First column, 1 police officer, for the new people that are hired.
The new contract has fewer steps, correct?
No more steps.
There, but, so explain what that means in terms of how you get the top scale though.
Take 6 years to get to the top scale.
What did it used to be?
3.
Well, 3 plus,
Unfortunately,
the fourth year you're on the new.
I really
top
think that as, approaching this from the, you know, from the budget outlook, and separate from ARP, I think we really should have had some really good explanation about what that contract means. Because we, other than knowing about the steps, I've not received any information, and finding out that it's for 8 years. We don't know, we've been told, okay, we're doing a better job of holding down the cost, but we don't have any specifics on that. You know, we have information here from the 2008, you know, statistics from the PFM study, which was, we got in 2020. We don't know how much Allentown is paying, Reading, Scranton, or Bethlehem. I mean, statistics just, you know, pardon me?
Everyone is paying less than the city of Erie.
Right.
In the state.
So I think it would be
even
helpful for us
Philadelphia
to,
for
not to be critical, but statistics just taken out of context really aren't helpful to us, I don't think.
But I did have a question though. So as far as the contractual thing, because if we hired new Erie officers, but they have prior experience, it could cut the time to come to the parade.
Correct.
Correct. So if we hired a couple of guys from Lawrence Park, they come in at the 90, whatever, not at the 60.
Right, and that's correct, but also taking into account, we've done a lot better job with the MMO, the pension has gone down. You know, the projections on the pension have gone up the next 4 years. If the stock market does well, the MMO may go down. So I mean,
I'm
again, I don't back up what
because
this
Chris didn't know.
These are average numbers, but the salary numbers are pretty good numbers. You know, group health could go down. So these are approximate.
Yeah, I was just giving that because it's in the contract and it's something that.
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
That's the only reason why.
You're absolutely correct.
If I may, there's no doubt in my mind that we need what we're talking about doing here. My only caveat is I don't want 2005 to happen again in 5 years. 2026. And as long as I'm here, I'll work as hard as I can to make sure that we'll be in a position to keep these guys on. But I was part of that heartbreaking school district. You know, we got that $5 million a year from GE, and we brought in new programs, and we brought in 35 good young people. And then $5 million a year went away after 5 years. And we had to say goodbye to them. We really thanks them to Collins for all those good teachers we sent out there. I don't want that to happen to us. I'm 100% behind the guys, and I will vote for it. But Mayor, you'll hold your feet to the fire.
That's fine.
Make it happen.
We're aware of the same thing. We don't want the same thing to happen. I'm really hoping that what we'll do over the next few years here is bring more jobs and more people to Erie and increase our revenue without increasing any form of taxes, just from having more people here. As you know, we've lost 40,000 people over the last 50 years. I want to turn that around. It's one of our top priorities, my team's top priority
bring more jobs, bring more people to Erie. That's what we really want to do. And if we're not able to do that, it's possible we might be able to do that. Talk negative, but it's possible we could do that. The chief's already talking about starting to pare back the force after 2 or 3 years, so that when we don't have the money anymore, we have the same number that we did before we started. That's the last thing I want to happen.
Guys need help.
Absolutely, that's the last thing I want to happen. But I'm hoping in a couple of years from now, we don't need to start doing that because so many more jobs and people are existing.
I'm impressed with the fact that these guys have gone up there and picked up grants, things like that. All these things are saying, hey, we need help. We need to give you.
So do we have a graph that shows the growth in projected revenues that you're expecting and the growth in the salaries? I mean, that's pretty optimistic, I think. I think it's very aspirational, but I'd like to see more hard numbers on that. One of the things, if you'll remember, I asked about LERTA, is that I know people are probably getting antsy here, but these are big numbers. The LERTA meeting that I sat in on with the county and the school board, it was Brian Polito who said with LERTA that what happened is after the LERTA expired, that the property owners went to the assessment board and said, oh, it's really not worth this much money. And he said that LERTA was actually hurting the school district. I asked years ago, could we have some numbers on, because we've had other properties on LERTA. We have the generous LERTA now, but give us some more data so that we have a little bit more confidence that all those houses that Hagen's invested in, which are in a trust somehow, I don't know what that's going to mean in terms of property taxes, where they were overpaid for to get to, be able to upgrade them. I'd like to see at least a guess as to how much LERTA is going to pay off in 10 years. Well, we're down to how many years now? Is it 7 years?
We're still rolling in. So.
What would it be?
Even 5 years and 8 years.
But we had others that were coming off the LERTA. I didn't make this up. This was the school superintendent saying this. And I was like, oh my God, that's happening? You mean they're saying that, after 5 or 7 years, we're going to pay this property tax? And then they go and they say, oh, wait a minute, it's really not worth that much. So I think.
We do fight them.
I know.
Yes.
Not picking on you, it's just, this is a lot of money.
Correct.
And it's a decision that's gonna be, that city council is gonna have to live with. For a common good, but it's a big number.
I agree that it is a big number. And the one thing to remember, as the mayor stated, if we get to year 2, 3, 4, and this is not financially feasible, then the chief is going to look at paring back. But we also have to remember, and I think everybody here knows that 2 or 3 years ago, when we started doing the 5-year projections as part of the budget book, when you looked out to that 4th and 5th year, there was a huge, huge deficit. And we've taken a lot of steps over the last few years to make up that deficit where, we were looking at a $20, $25 million deficit in year 5, where now we've pared that down to $6, $8 million. That 5-year projection in the back of the book. We're constantly doing things to make that number lessen. So you're almost saying, what's going to happen 5 years from now? I don't think any of us know what's going to happen 5 years from now.
We're also going to continue aggressively going after grants to try to replace some of the funding. And in the past, CDBG, we're not allowed to use CDBG funding anymore for, we had to reduce a lot of what we were using because it was being made for overtime. It needs to be used for community policing. So we believe that we would be able to use some CDBG funding to help, especially with the juvenile unit, because of the focus of that and the work that we're doing.
I think the bottom line is that we have to live in the present. You want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Put it this way, if we ever had an opportunity
to give this a chance, it's now. Whether it's gonna take everybody to make it succeed, is there any guarantees? No, but if they keep doing the due diligence of trying to get any additional grant monies this year and going forward, as well as, who knows, maybe we'll save money in what we've been doing in overtime at almost 1.5 million a year. You cut that back. I mean, this is gonna be a little trial and error, but heck, we haven't had this opportunity since
Bottom line is, we just have to keep the communication lines open. Liz has a good point, that she didn't know about the 8-year contract with the police. I don't know how that would change anything.
which I think is a bonus that maybe all of us weren't aware of.
Well, it depends on what's in it. I mean.
Well, I think for the most part, you know where we're gonna be at for the next 8 years, instead of.
Okay, so could we find the top scale salary in 8 years? That's the number I'd like to see. Okay? The top scale salary, what the average salary will be in 8 years. I think we need to see that.
We can get to that.
I said it'd be around $100,000. I haven't done the numbers. The increases plus the
We're
longevity.
averaging 100,000 now. So in 8 years, what's the?
In the contract, they agreed to the lowest raises they've ever received in the past, what, three
I know, Renee, but you know, we're getting, you know, we had people stand up here last night, whatever, and you don't have a revenue, you don't have a revenue problem, you have a spending problem. You know, I mentioned the guy who has the signs out there, lower property taxes. Well, then you go and you know where our budget is going to. It's going to personnel, and a large part of it is to public safety. So let people know what they're paying for. Whether you agree with it or not, the public ought to know how much we're paying for public safety.
And year after year, we give them that, we just aren't sure what we're gonna be paying in 5 years.
I know, but we ought to tell them what we're paying now. I mean, we're being criticized by people.
It's in the budget.
I agree it's in the budget, but do you think the average person knows what the average salary is? No, they don't.
People do want police officers in their neighborhood, though.
Right, but I don't know that they know what, this isn't a criticism, but they ought to know what the compensation is.
It's in the budget handout for.
I know.
For both police and fire. You read that thing front to back.
I know it.
And the officers present, I do want to let you know that especially the community officers, you do make a difference. I was just talking to someone on the phone coming here today and said, oh, I got a fist bump from Officer Max. I don't remember Officer Max. And it uplifted the person. So you do make a difference. Just to be very thankful.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just for the record, that I'm in favor of what the police department is asking for. I'm aware of the job that they do. I'm aware of the dangers that they face every day. And I know what the mental health folks are going through. Previously, I was director of 2 drug and alcohol agency prevention and intervention and treatment. And I underwent 3 years of mental health training along with my staff at the time. So I know what they're talking about. Also, the presence of the police officers during my summer leave I'm not talking about the kids. I'm talking about adults, 24, 25, and some of them are in and out of criminal justice system. But they know Officer Russo, and several of them came to me and said, you know that dude over there? I said, Officer Russo? He said, yeah, that dude. Yeah. He all right. That's what I want to hear. Because when they say an officer is all right, and I tell them the officer's name and they still say that dude, that means they respect him. Not as a police, but as a person, that dude. And it took the police officers and the individuals to keep peace and harmony at their court. Liz is there, Kathy was there. We have a lot of folks up there. And they do their job. And they need some help. And I'm going to give them some help. It's important. They're going to be in the neighborhood. They're going to be walking. We had a fatality today. And when people say, well, what is the police doing? Police do not know when a crime is going to happen. So they are reactive. They get there, they investigate. And we need to help them. Our total community. You got 20 people watching and nobody's seeing nothing. So how are they going to do their job expeditiously? It takes time. And the PAL program kept me on the straight and narrow, along with the iron cord that my mother used. Now, those two together, mothers today can't do that. But those two together put me on the straight and narrow. I was part of the PA program, PAL program. Basically, when I came up, it was all basically putting us in the gym, in a boxing ring, and that's where it started. And that's how I started, boxing. I was fine until I got hit, so I went and played basketball. I went and played basketball. But they need the help. I am 100% for this, and I'm gonna, when it's time to vote, I'm gonna vote for 100% because I've been there and I've been through it. And their programs, I know what you're talking about. I know what the mental health folks are going through. And sometimes you can recognize a kid with mental health problems. And when I do, I treat them entirely different than any other kid. Because I have to find out what their home life is about. They got to go home, maybe to drugs, etc. Police don't know that. Mental health can do that. But if we provide mental health training, that's something they'll be able to recognize. Not all the time, because they have to keep themselves safe first in order to help others. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Witherspoon. Does anyone else have anything to say before we wrap up?
I also support this now. I know I know it's been disagree that the need is not there. But my big question is, again, when this money runs out, I hate to see this go away. And I think the challenge I've been for years is how do we bring more revenue without raising taxes? So that's the big challenge. It's not going to just be 4 or 5 years. I think we just need to keep going up the hill, but we need to calculation that we have for revenue coming in and expenditures. And that's the challenge we're at. Again, so I guess I'm saying, we're here today, and this is definitely a need. I don't think it's gonna say there's not a need there. It's been recently. But we keep seeing this imbalance in costs, and we need to somehow increase revenue without raising the taxes. That's our challenge that we need to work with. I know, Mary, you said that we're gonna try to, that's your main goal, is try to bring in more businesses and bring more people to live in Erie. That's the key. It's just gonna take a long time to get there. So we're gonna continue to be challenged with these financial issues, as you all know. Nothing we're coming with that.
Kathy, we're meeting with Chief Spizzardi, Chief Walco in 2 weeks. So if there's any questions about this portion of the budget, financially, anyone please give me a call, or with the chief, the plan of the program, obviously give me a call at any time, or we can talk more about it at that time.
What would be really helpful is if all those new police officers decided to live in the city of Erie. Right?
Yes, I agree.
I agree.
I used to have a lot of police officers, not a lot, but I knew where they lived in my neighborhood, and I don't see that anymore.
Can we put that into the requirement?
You can't put it,
Of course not.
you cannot put it in that requirement, but you can, you can encourage it, you can incentivize it, and there are ways of doing that. Other municipalities have done that, offer bonuses to people who would reside
I'll
in
take
city
that.
limits. And so there's lots of innovative ways of making it more attractive, even though we can't, mandate it. But it's, the Civil Service Board isn't here, but, there are ways of incentivizing it and giving, and making sure that the people who, who decide to live in the city, are considered before persons who are not gonna live in the city. And that goes for jobs up and down the administration. It's a question that can be asked. And then whoever's doing the hiring can govern themselves accordingly.
I want to thank everyone who spoke tonight and everyone who came, and know that there's a lot of burnout. So I am so thankful for your commitment to mental health and our community. Frontlines, I know people who have said, I lost my social worker, and they went on to a different job. It's very needed work, but there's a lot of people that are leaving us because of burnout. So thank you for your commitment. Thank you very much for your dedication, and thank you all for coming today. Thank you.
Hey, dude.